The media has no credibility. They really don't. Nobody pays attention to them. We all know that they have consistently and systematically lied about Donald Trump and about his supporters. So whatever they say, most of America, the majority, looks at it and says, who cares what they think? We don't trust them anyway. They've destroyed their credibility. They might have had an influence 8 years ago, maybe some 4 years ago. Today, Sean, I think the media, as we know it, the mainstream media, the big networks and the major papers like the New York Times and the Washington Compost, as I've called it for decades, they no longer matter. And we just don't pay attention to them. So I think Donald Trump's in a position to do some extraordinary things and do it early.
All right, guys, I can still say this. Happy New Year again. It's exciting. This is the first non-holiday day, right? Yesterday we were on air, but a lot of you took the day off. Today we're back, kicking into high gear for 2025. Mike Huckabee is here. He is President Trump's ambassador designate to Israel. What a great pick. What an amazing guy. What a great pick. I think I'm going to ask him this, but I think he's the first evangelical to be ambassador to Israel from the United States. Pretty cool, right? And a lot to build on. They had the Abraham Accords last time, a lot to get into with him. So I'm going to break it all down. Before I get into that, though, you've heard me talk a lot about weight loss and getting in shape and wellness. And I've been trying to do this for like a month now. Luckily, I'm down a few pounds because I didn't want to wait for the New Year's. I knew the holidays were coming. Some people said, Sean, you're nuts for doing this before the holidays. But I didn't want to put on a bunch of weight before the holidays and try to get it off. If you've dealt with this before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So my friend Seb Gorka hooked me up with the people at myphdweightloss.com. And I started working with them. And I knew it was going to be a challenge during the holiday season, but I'm still down several pounds because I was able to not only lose weight, but maintain it because of the plan that these guys give you. It's fantastic. It's not a fad diet. It's not, hey, we're going to restrict everything to this for 5 days and then you're done. It's a lifestyle change. And then they help you maintain it. You get one-on-one consultations every week with a nutritionist. They talk to you about what you're doing, where you're excelling, where you're having a hard time, and then make adjustments. I text with mine. Because I went to a bunch of holiday things. I'm like, hey, I'm going to this big thing. It's a plated dinner. And she would text back, okay, drink this before you go, have this before you head out, fill up on some protein, drink a glass of water. And there's a level of accountability I've never had. And it's a total lifestyle change, not a fad diet. That's why I love this thing. 74% of Americans are overweight. So if this is your New Year's resolution, then do it in a way that I think is healthy and sustainable. Call the folks at My PhD Weight Loss. They even send you some initial starter food that comes with the price of the program. I love it. They've got these shakes, caramel peanut butter. Oh, you feel like it's a guilty pleasure, and it's actually good for you. I'm telling you, it's amazing. Call them at 1-864-644-1900, or better yet, go to myphdweightloss.com, myphdweightloss.com. All right, guys, it is a new year. I made some resolutions myself. Mostly boring ones. Again, as I just said with the folks at My PhD Weight Loss, I want to get back in shape. I've been saying this forever, and I feel like I'm on a good path now with them. So I'm going to keep doing that. I want to get some financial stuff in order. I want to get some tasks done, stop procrastinating on a few projects that I've been having. But I feel really good. We are going to see a big change in the way that our government operates. I feel good about this. I've said this before. If you've listened to the show, or hopefully you're new to 2025 watching this. Donald Trump has used these 4 years out of office to focus on three things: people, policies, and process. And we're going to talk to Mike Huckabee in just a second. He's one of those people. He's got the right people surrounding him now that know how to get the job done. He's been able to think about the policies that will drive the Make America Great movement, right? The MAHA movement, the policies matter. And then he also understands the process. Right? How do we go, like when we get told we got to stop here, how do we go around him? Because he saw it during 4 years, all these forces trying to stop him. Members of Congress, the deep state, the bureaucracy, the media. 4 years, his team has been playing checkers. And now they're playing chess. They know how to do it. They know how to move it. Those three things: people, policies, process. And we're going to meet one of them right now. the former governor of Arkansas, the father of my former colleague in the White House, Sarah, the current governor of Arkansas, and more importantly, President Trump's ambassador designate to Israel, Governor Mike Huckabee. Governor, good to see you. Happy New Year. I'm excited for what 2025 is going to bring in for us.
Well, me too, Sean. Happy New Year to you. I think all of us are glad to get 2024 behind us. It was a brutal election year. More than that, it was just a brutal year for America because we had a president who didn't know he was there. We had a substitute candidate that really was an unbelievably poor candidate. And yet we ended on a positive note, thank goodness, the reelection of Donald Trump. And I think 2025 is going to be a great year for America.
Yeah, I do too. 18 days until the inauguration. All right, I want to get to a lot of good stuff. But before I do that, are you a resolutions kind of guy?
You know, I used to be, but I finally made a resolution to not do any more resolutions. So that's my resolution. Don't do any.
All right. Well, that makes that question easy. I think my kids are young, and I think we have this fun family tradition where we write them all down. Everybody gets to do some stuff. And then the following year when we go out to dinner as a family, we kind of go over what we said we do and we get to grade each other. So it's sort of become a family thing, which is fun because, you either lost 10 pounds or you didn't, and I always didn't. So, it's fun. I will say this, though, and this is kind of maybe the perfect day to do this little reflection. I can't help but to really think about the difference between 2016 when Donald Trump won and 2020 when he won, and this period of time in the lead up to the inauguration. And before I share with you my thoughts, I want to give you a chance to share with yours because I have some interesting takes on how I think these times are different and why, but I'd love your take.
Well, of course, you had a front row seat back in 2016, so yours will be pretty accurate in terms of that one. Here's what I think is significantly different. In 2016, Donald Trump was not fully prepared for what he was about to do. I don't mean that as a detrimental remark about him. There's no way that anyone would be prepared. And I think even people around him were somewhat surprised. Hey, he won. He beat Hillary, pulled this thing off. He was surrounded in some ways by people who pushed him to appoint those who were loyal to them more than they were loyal to Trump and the America First agenda. That put him in a very tough spot to start with, though he didn't realize it for a long time. Secondly, we have now 4 years of Joe Biden versus 4 years of Donald Trump. And the people of America were able to clearly see the distinction and realize that, yeah, Donald Trump sometimes will say some things that seem impolite, but the truth is we love his transparency, his authenticity, and the fact that we do know what he's thinking. We're not being told one thing and delivered something else, and that's refreshing. People are ready for Donald Trump to be president. We saw it on Election Day. But since that time, look at what's happened. Every world leader has come hat in hand and made their pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring. You have people from the media who either have made their pilgrimage, like Joe and Mika, who went down to pretend that they're fine now and everything's good. And you had ABC, who had to write a check for $15 million because George Stephanopoulos ended up being the partisan hack that he always has been rather than a true journalist. So everything has changed. You're not seeing the level of, I'm leaving the country, even though a lot of these celebrities say they will. And quite frankly, Sean, I hope some of them do. It would be good for all of us if it happened.
Yeah. I think, though, to your point about corporate America and the media, there was this feeling in 2016 that we weren't legitimate. Russia had tipped the scale. All this hoax that was perpetrated on the American people, these lies. And from day one, I remind people, on Inauguration Day, the media lied, tried to inflame racial tensions by insinuating that Donald Trump had falsely removed the bust of Martin Luther King from, and that was not, a simple, when I tell people this, I go, all the reporter had to do was go like this. For those listening on the audio, I literally just turned around. It was right there. And it was a gotcha moment. And I felt like that typified the entire lead up to it. It was gotcha. You're bad. You're not legitimate. Whereas this time, to your point, these corporate and media leaders, and even Democrats, whether it's the Doge effort to reduce, government waste, are coming and saying, "Oh, we want to work with the guy." There's such a difference but I think it's also in Donald Trump, right? And that's kind of interesting to me that 2016, he was fighting back, right? He was fighting the media, I don't need you guys. You're a bunch of jerks. This time, he's risen above it. And I think it's because they embraced him as the rightful winner of this election. They were wrong on DEI and woke policies. He was right. And so therefore, he's being the bigger man. The tone and tenor are different this time. I think because he reflects their actions towards him. In 2016, it was sort of like this really contentious attempt for them to show that they didn't like Trump. This time, they're like, the American people have spoken.
I think you've really hit it, and especially on the idea that in 2016, they defied and denied that he was the duly elected president. So you had Hillary out there saying that he was illegitimate. You had a number of Democrats saying they should not even certify the election. I don't know why that wasn't an insurrection, but we had that. We're not having it this time. I mean, he won so decisively. The popular vote, the Electoral College in a landslide, all 7 swing states. You look at the map of America, it's a bright red. It's hard, even for his harshest critics, to deny that his win was a true statement of the American people who woke up and said, we're sick of this nonsense you guys have shoved down our throats, telling us the economy's great when we know it isn't, or telling us that, COVID, we saved you from that, and we know you didn't. The nonsense about gender fluidity and the insanity that's come with that. Overall, Democrats overplayed their hand. Donald Trump had a masterful campaign. It was brilliant. And I think people, frankly, even his critics are optimistic that our economy is going to get better. The world is going to get more peaceful. People recognize that, like him or not, Donald Trump is a leader and he gets things done. I said on a television show last week, I said, that typically a person in politics has strong ideological leanings. And I said, he has ideology, but he's not an ideologue. He's not even that ideological. He's a pragmatist. The two questions Donald Trump approaches every issue with is not, is this right or left? Is this Democrat or Republican? He simply wants to know 2 things. One, will it work? And number 2, will it make life better for the people that it's intended to help? And if those 2 questions are answered, whether it's considered a liberal or a conservative policy is irrelevant to him because he's not ideological. He is pragmatic.
Yeah. I've noticed, and people who I associate with who might not be the biggest Trump supporters have said to me, Sean, the tone and tenor of this Donald Trump is different than the one that we're used to. He's more measured. He's more pragmatic. He's less pugnacious, maybe is the word. Where and so the question I have is, and again, I always think it's a reflection of how he's being treated. You treat him with respect, he treats you with respect. You come at him like a spider monkey, he'll come back at you. And I feel like I actually think it's deeper than that. I believe you get 2 assassination attempts and threats on your life. You think deeper about your relationship with God. You think about how valuable life is and your legacy and what you want to do with the time that you have on this earth. Am I off base here, or do you think that maybe this is just Trump and then we'll have a new one on Inauguration Day?
No, I think you've exactly nailed it, especially on the 2 assassination attempts. That's sobering for any human being. I don't care who you are. And I think it was a defining moment in Butler, Pennsylvania, when after being shot in the ear and almost within a couple of millimeters being murdered on national television, who stood up with blood coming down his face and said, fight, fight, fight. And he defied every kind of instinct most people would have, would be to stay down, stay covered up. He stands up, faces the world, and potentially facing his attacker and basically saying, "You miss me." I mean, it was just, it was a moment in history that we'll never be able, I think, to see again. And it was not scripted. This was Donald Trump in his genuine, authentic fight mode. And I think a lot of Americans looked at him and said, you know, if this guy can stand up from a bullet and say, let's fight back, let's save this country, that's the kind of guy I want leading this country. It was I believe, a turning point, not only for him personally, but for the country.
I do too. I mean, I had lunch in December. I was at a lunch, let's just be clear, with, I think it was 6 Medal of Honor recipients.
Mm.
And we were talking about their sacrifice. And as I was listening to their acts of heroism and bravery, I kept thinking to myself, let's be honest. I don't know that I would even, I could do, like, in that moment, would I do what they did?
Mm.
And there is an extraordinary human being that can do these kind of things. And if we're honest with ourselves, we can, you know, there's a continuum, which we say we hide under the bed. Maybe we rush. I don't know. Sometimes, hopefully, with God's grace, I won't be tested. But to your point about him getting shot, I thought about it, and I'm like, you know, he gets up and goes, fight, fight, fight. He has no idea how hit he really is. Yeah. Right? I mean, he knows there's blood. He knows there's agents. There's chaos ensuing. And I kept thinking to myself, what would I have done in that moment? I don't know that I can honestly answer it, but I certainly wouldn't have raised my hand and said, fight, fight, fight. I know that, if I'm going to be honest. And I really agree with your sentiment, because I think people looked at that and said, if your gut feeling is to get up and to say fight, when you don't even know how you're doing, that says a lot about what's in your core.
Yeah. He rose to the occasion in a way that you see among a Medal of Honor recipient, because that's an unscripted moment. It's not something, say, okay, now today we're going out and here's what's going to happen. You're going to get shot and you're going to have a couple of moments to think about it. I mean, typically a person who now has just been within millimeters of being murdered is going to be in a, I got to be protected, get me out of here mode. He took charge. The agents weren't in charge of that moment. He was.
Right,
he told me, get me my shoes. I want to stand up. You're not going to pull me away from this stage. I'm going to stand up and face the world and tell them to fight. I mean, it was, again, that was his natural reaction. And that's the point of all of this. It was who he is, because when you're squeezed, people say, you know, what do you get when you squeeze a lemon? And the answer is, well, lemon juice. No, the answer is whatever's in the lemon. And so when a human being is squeezed, what comes out of them is what's really inside of them. So what we saw come out of Donald Trump that day was what was inside of him. And it was courage, it was leadership, and it was take charge. What do we want in the president? We want courage, we want leadership, and we want someone who can take charge.
Yeah, that's you're right. Because the moments that a presidency is defined are those moments of crisis. And we want someone who's going to be willing to stand up, to fight, to do the right thing. And as you said, rightly so, that this is what a president's all about. Here's my question for you. As a guy who's like run for president before, who interviews a lot of these folks, do you think that what happens when Donald Trump exits the stage of elected office, right? He'll obviously, I think till he takes his last breath, Donald Trump will be a factor. But I wonder, meaning, do you think that there's somebody, an heir to him, that could take his place?
There's not going to be another Donald Trump, because he comes from a very different place than anyone ever has in politics. He never even ran for sheriff. I mean, this guy comes down the escalator from the Trump Tower, where he's run multi-billion-dollar businesses, and says, I'm going to be president. And people are saying, yeah, you usually don't start there. You got to go through maybe being governor, senator, or something. And yet he defied all political gravity to be Donald Trump. But he also had a command of knowing how to communicate to the average person, particularly the working class people, in a way that no one has ever been able to do before. He knows how to brand. He brands his opponents. He brands the people he likes. And those brands tend to stick. And there are just so many things about Donald Trump that I don't see as characteristic in anyone else on the playing field. Will there be other leaders? Of course. Strong leaders? Absolutely. Articulate? Maybe even more so. But nobody is going to come in and replicate the extraordinary path that Donald Trump has had.
You know, you are a leader in the evangelical movement. You're a pastor yourself. Why has he been able to do or been so successful within the evangelical and Christian communities in a way that people like George W. Bush, an actual evangelical, weren't?
Authenticity. You know, I think some people believe that the evangelical community are looking for someone who is like them. Well, they're not. They would love to have someone who shares all their beliefs and values, but what they want is somebody who will lead the country in a uplifting way, but more importantly, who is authentic to oneself. And a lot of people have questioned me and said, why did evangelicals support Trump? He's not one of us. And I said, no, he isn't. In fact, I introduced him in the summer of 2016 at a big event at the Marriott Marquis in New York. Ben Carson and I hosted it. We were trying to really raise support for Donald Trump. And he was sitting 4 feet away from me on the stage. And I said to this crowd of 1,200 religious leaders from all over America, I said, guys, Donald Trump is not one of us. Let's not pretend that he is. I said, quite frankly, you're not going to find him sitting on the front pew of your church Sunday. I'm not sure the man could find John 3:16 in a marked New Testament. But I said, we're not voting for him to be our pastor, but we're voting on him to be our president and someone who would take this country and lead it in the right way. And as far as we're concerned, leave us alone and let us practice the First Amendment. Don't try to tell us what to believe, what to say, or how to worship.
Wow, that's funny. It's just hysterical. Sometimes people on the left will ask, how can people that are very religious support the guy? And I've actually never articulated as well as you did, but I've just talked about the fact that sometimes God has very interesting tools and vehicles to carry his will out. And it's not always the purest. The Bible very clear about this, that it's not always the purest among us that God has chosen to enact his will.
I had a pastor when I was a teenager who used to say, God can hit a straight lick with a crooked stick. And I'm not saying that about Donald Trump. I'm just saying that, you know, we tend to want to package maybe a personality and think that that's what the Lord has to use. Well, he doesn't. And what I feel like that Donald Trump has done, he has shown us what courageous leadership looks like. He did it in his first term. I cannot imagine that he was able to get out of bed every day knowing that he was going to be faced with 100 phony stories about him, an unbelievable level of everything from criminal charges to impeachments by people who hated his very existence. And yet he got up every day. He continued to do the job throughout this campaign with all of the criminal indictments and stuff that was so nonsensical. I think Americans looked at him and said, if he can keep going, faced with all that he's having to face, then there's somebody who can lead this country. No matter what this world throws at him, he's able to stand up to it. And that's one of the reasons I think you saw record numbers of Black voters, Hispanic voters, younger people voting for a Republican when they typically would not.
You know, in 18 days, he's going to take the oath of office again. There's been fairly widespread acclaim for how he's handled the transition and support for his policies. Do you think that once the rubber hits the road, if you will, day 1, day 2, day 3, and they start enacting them and the media goes into full media mode and attacking his policies and lying about mass deportations and this and that, that there's going to be a shift? Or do you think that because of the results of the election, the dynamic has changed?
I think the dynamic has changed because the media has no credibility. They really don't. Nobody pays attention to them. We all know that they have consistently and systematically lied about Donald Trump and about his supporters. So whatever they say, most of America, the majority, looks at it and says, who cares what they think? We don't trust them anyway. They've destroyed their credibility. They might have had an influence 8 years ago, maybe some 4 years ago. Today, Sean, I think the media, as we know it, the mainstream media, the big networks and the major papers like the New York Times and the Washington Compost, as I've called it for decades, they no longer matter. And we just don't pay attention to them. So I think Donald Trump's in a position to do some extraordinary things and do it early. And having gone through 3 governor terms and 2 lieutenant governor terms, one thing I learned, sometimes the hard way, if you're going to do something big, do it immediately, because your political capital is never bigger than it is on your first day in office. And every day after that, it begins to dwindle, whether you do anything with it or not. And the people who wait and say, I'm going to hold this off for my 3rd year, my 2nd year, will make a huge mistake, because you need to come out swinging, do big things. And when they're successful, people then will continue to trust you, even though in your 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year, it is much harder to get things done, because by then there were people you didn't appoint and you made them mad. There were people who didn't get their way with the bill they put forward and they're mad at you. You said some things that hurt some feelings and they're mad at you. So if you're going to do big things, do it immediately.
You mentioned your service as lieutenant governor, as governor. You ran for president twice. Based on how the media landscape has changed, if somebody came to you right now and said, Governor, I'm thinking of running for fill in the blank, governor or president, knowing what you know now and what you've seen, what advice would you give them about how to interact with the media and how to craft an effective media strategy?
Don't worry about them too much. Use your own assets of social media. Go directly to the people. Bypass the mainstream press for the most part. I wouldn't say treat them with contempt, although it's easy to want to do and it's easy to do. But don't cater to them. Don't believe that they're going to carry your message and that if you don't somehow charm them, that you can't be effective, because they just don't have that much credibility. Look at the newspaper readerships. They've collapsed. It's cratered. Very few people read the paper. Look at what's happened to networks, CNN and MSNBC. Their ratings have totally fallen to the basement, and people aren't watching them. And the people who are watching them only to be stroked with what they already believe. Nobody's really paying attention to them and saying, oh, this is where I get information that I can trust. I just think that it's a different world completely. And the media, they've done it to themselves. They have no one to blame but themselves. And as a result, it is a great time to be an elected official, because you can craft your own message, deliver it directly to the people without having to go through the vehicle that is being driven by somebody who hates your guts, and you'll get your message directly to them. And thank God for Elon Musk. I mean, what he's done with now X, I still want to call it Twitter.
It is
but
Twitter.
Turned it into a true free speech platform. And it has far greater influence than the combined newspapers of the Post, the Times, and all the major papers across the country, and the 3 big networks.
Yeah. Do you think that J.D. Vance is the immediate frontrunner for 2028?
Probably so, simply because as vice president, he's going to be closest to the message, closest to the machinery. And if the Trump presidency is going to be as successful as I believe it's going to be, and I really do believe it will be, he's in a very strong position to take the mantle, because, as we know, Donald Trump cannot, no matter what, he cannot run again. So It's not like that JD is sort of sitting on the sidelines and hoping he can stay there for 8 years. He has to maintain it for 4. He's already demonstrated an extraordinary intellect and calm capacity to deal with the press, the most hostile kind of interviews or debates. He's handled it with an extraordinary level of just, a demeanor that is disarming, but nobody can question his brilliance. he really has been a great choice.
I think he impressed a heck of a lot of people. And it was funny how many people, because of the media, initially were turned off by him. And as I would tell people after the debate, after big interviews, would text me and say, "You were right. This guy is substantive. He's smart. He's empathetic. I mean, he really is everything the opposite of what the media tried to portray him to be."
Yeah, he's got all the right tools, and he's the right age. He's a whole new
Yeah.
generation. So I believe if he wants to run, which I'm assuming he probably will, he will be the front runner coming out of the gate. Now, there'll be others who will go after the opportunity, and somebody may slip up on him, but he's going to be the guy to beat. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And all he has to do is be faithful and loyal to the America First message, to the successes of the Trump administration. And of course, that means that if that's the case, Donald Trump will probably put the oil of anointing on him, and that makes it even more powerful.
All right, I want to talk to you a little bit. Take us behind the scenes. You were one of the first appointees that Donald Trump named, the ambassador to Israel. Is this something that you sought? Is this something that he sought you out for?
I did not seek it. In fact, I had not had a discussion with him about it. I had not asked for it. There were a few people who had said to me, "I hope he names you to be ambassador." And I said, I like my life. I'm living a good life. I'm not looking for a federal job. And I really wasn't.
Right.
And I really thought David Friedman would go back. He is a dear friend of mine. He was a phenomenal ambassador. And I thought, if Friedman wants to go back, he should, and he would be the best guy, and that's who I'd support. So it really caught me off guard. I was, as I say, sitting at my desk, minding my own business, and all of a sudden my phone rings. I normally never pick up a call if I don't recognize the number or that I'm on my call list. His number is actually in my directory, but it wasn't his phone. It was a number I did not recognize. But Sean, this is one of those God winks,
right,
where something told me, take this call. Normally I wouldn't have, but there was this voice that said, take the call. I pushed accept. It was Donald Trump on the line, not a surrogate, not someone in between. It was him. And he said, I want you to be ambassador to Israel. I mean, Donald, you know him very well. You worked for him a long time. He's not a typical Southerner who spends 6 minutes engaging to the conversation, then has the point of conversation, then another 6 minutes disengaging. He's straight to the point, typical New Yorker. So he just says, okay, I want you to be ambassador to Israel. He didn't say, would you consider, can you talk about this, think about it? I want you to be ambassador to Israel. And honestly, it was an extraordinary moment because it is the only job that he would ask me to do that I absolutely would say yes to. And because I've been going to Israel since 1973. My first trip was at the age of 17. I was a month away from my 18th birthday, 3 months before the Yom Kippur War. And I've been going back ever since. That's almost 52 years of a relationship. I've known Netanyahu very well personally for over 30 years. I've got deep relationships with members of the Knesset and members in the business community in Israel. I've been over 100 times to that country. It's going to be unusual. I'll go and I won't need a tourist map to know how to get around. So
are you going to be the first Christian to ever serve in this capacity?
Certainly the first evangelical Christian. I think maybe Harry Truman had someone who maybe was, by his affiliation, Protestant. I'm not sure. But typically...
But definitely in modern history, too.
Yeah. Typically, the ambassador to Israel is Jewish. And I wondered, would the reaction be a little jilted? And it wasn't. I'll tell you, it's been amazing. The reaction in Israel to my nomination has been unbelievably positive. The same in the Jewish community here in the U.S. And I even asked some friends of mine who are Jewish, why are people okay with me being named? And here's what they said, which makes sense. If Trump were to name a Jewish person to this ambassadorship, the immediate response is, well, of course. And they're going to be pro-Israel because they're Jewish. He names an evangelical Christian. And for me, being a a very pro-Israel Zionist, there's credibility because they know it's not for my feeling of, okay, I'm Jewish, I've got to support the Jewish state. I do it because I've been going there. I know the country. I've seen what it has become, this extraordinary place of freedom, free speech, democracy, an oasis in an island or rather in a sea of tyranny and totalitarianism. And it's a pretty extraordinary place. And America's relationship is incredibly strategic. So I'm giddy about the prospects of going. And I know it's going to be a challenge. It's just not going to be the easiest ambassadorship. And it's not so much about hosting receptions and parties. It really is about how do you deliver the president's message, which led us to the Abraham Accords.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was something for which Donald Trump should have been given a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
That was a major accomplishment. And people, particularly in the press, never would give him the credit that he deserved for having pulled that off. So this could be Abraham Accords 2.0. Where else can this go? And what we've just seen in the last 15 days, the collapse of Syria. There's a total realignment in the Middle East going on right now. And with the Iranians in trouble economically, their inability to fund Hamas, which is collapsing, Hezbollah is on the run. It's a different Middle East than it was even 1 year ago.
So are the Abraham Accords something that you want to pick up the mantle and run with? Or is there a different legacy that you think Trump should pursue?
Well, I think there's, again, and I'm not trying to speak for the president because it's his policy. An ambassador goes and does the president's work, not his own. But Donald Trump has an extraordinary opportunity not only to expand the Abraham Accords to other Gulf state countries, but he also has an incredible opportunity to help bring a level of security to Israel and protect really the Israelis from having these kind of threats on an ongoing basis. That's going to be an extraordinary part of what he's going to be able to do. And I think he will accomplish it. Yeah.
We've always maintained as a country this notion of a two-state solution. Is that the still the answer, or is there another answer that will result in long-term peace?
Once again, I want to be very careful not to try to speak for the president. So I think he understood in the first term that the idea of two states in the same geographical footprint are impractical. And I said before, he's a pragmatist. So no matter what the ideology might be, oh, that would be a wonderful thing, wouldn't it? Well, it isn't. And by the way, we've had a Palestinian state. When people said, there needs to be a Palestinian state, we've had one. It's called Gaza. That's your Palestinian state. How'd that turn out? Right. So if anybody thinks that you can put this Palestinian state and stick it right next to the Jewish state, in fact, on top of it, sharing zip codes and street signs, and somehow you have two governments all claiming the same piece of land, and one of those governments does not believe the other one even should exist. So this is not realistic. And that's where I think there's an opportunity. Now, are there capacities to bring some level of prosperity to what would be considered the Arab population, who may call themselves Palestinian, but that's a term that, quite frankly, does not represent a government or a history. It's a name that was embraced by Yasser Arafat in 1962, created in order to justify the annihilation of Israel. So, people need to understand the history of what all of this means. There were always people living in the geographical area, Arab descent, and the term Palestinian was not so much a term that was about a ethnicity or a geopolitical group. It really was a geographical term, because prior to 1962, if you used the term Palestinian, you could be referring to Jews as much as you would be referring to Arabs. So that term, Jewish people said, yeah, we're Palestinian. They considered themselves Palestinian. People say that's not true. I say go back and rent the movie Exodus that Paul Newman was in, that Otto Preminger directed, 1960 movie. And throughout the movie, Jews are called Palestinians. Why? Because that was the way it was until 62.
I don't want to go out on a limb here, but do you think, I look back to the Iranian hostage crisis. Reagan gets inaugurated, and the Iranians, almost as a last minute screw you to the Carter administration, let the hostages go. Do you think that we're going to see on January 20th the hostages released because they don't want to deal with Donald Trump? They're fearful of him, or is that pie in the sky?
They better be fearful of him. I thought the most powerful thing that he has said in the entire process of being elected and post-election was when he made it clear, and he said to Hamas, if those hostages aren't released by the time that I'm sworn in, you will have hell to pay. Yeah. That's leadership. And that's the only thing these people understand. These hostages should never have been held this long. And Sean, some of them, they're being held right now, they're American citizens. Joe Biden has put more pressure on Israel.
He doesn't even acknowledge it.
What in the world is this? And Donald Trump said exactly the right thing. He said, let those hostages go or you'll have hell to pay. Here's the difference. Joe Biden has been like Barney Fife with one bullet in his shirt pocket. Donald Trump is Wyatt Earp. And these guys better understand that, he doesn't just wave a gun around. He means business. And I think he wasn't kidding when he says they'll have hell to pay if they don't let the hostages go. And, the expression is, what around and find out. I think they may find out.
I do too. Governor, our time has come to an end. I just want to say, look, I got asked, was I going back in the administration? I said, look, I got young kids. They got to go to college. I've spent a year and a half building a show. You've spent a lot of time since running for president building a brilliant brand, right? There's a reason that people want to be associated with you, why you've got a very successful show. And I just want to compliment you for you and Mrs. Huckabee, because I know like the easy answer is to sit back and to keep doing the show and doing all these partnerships that you have. But you've chosen to get back in. And I think it speaks volumes to your character and to your family's character of service. So thank you for what you're doing, because I have some, not all, but at least a partial understanding of what you're sacrificing for your country by doing this. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. Janet and I feel like it is a calling. And, the income is going to take about a 90% hit. But I'm at a point in life where it's time. And I'm excited to serve my country and to serve my president. And I feel like it's going to be an endeavor that I will be thrilled to be able to do.
All right. God bless you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you too, Sean. Thank you.
You bet. All right. What a great conversation with Governor Huckabee. Just the kind of person you want to get going with. I've told you before, I'll tell you again, if you want to make another New Year's resolution that you're going to stop helping woke companies, you're going to vote with your wallet, not just your vote in November, do what I've done. Switch over. I found a great American company where I can start to get almost all of my household supplies, beauty care, soap, shampoo, deodorant, my wife's makeup, sunscreen, all of the things that I used to go to Walmart or Target or Amazon, I can now get from an American company that has conservative values, that's American made, that's not toxic. The cleaning supplies literally don't have a safety cap on them. All the beauty care stuff meets or exceeds European standards. I love this stuff. So it's also, it's better quality, it's more affordable, and it arrives at your house in 2 days. If you want to know what I'm talking about, though, do me a favor. Text this number. I'll send you a video back to show you how to do it. But just text 276-500-1185. 276-500-1185. I'll send you a video explaining what I'm talking about, and then you can sign up and order all of this stuff. It's amazing. You can get an essential box of just the basics that I'm talking about, or you can order a la carte. But I love the fact that I'm now saying no to the woke DEI agenda of so many of these corporations and feeling good about the products that I'm using. So join me in doing that. Text again, 276-500-1185. We've got on the show tomorrow an unbelievable show with Mick Mulvaney. He's a former director of management and budget under Donald Trump. We're going to do a deep dive into the budget to find out how we're spending money as a country and how we can fix it. Why do we keep spending money the way that we do? And how bad is it? You will never hear this conversation anywhere. Trust me. Tune in tomorrow. Mick Mulvaney will be here to explain it all in a way that nobody else will. Thanks for being with us tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.